If you fancy having a go at making your own inks, a walk in the woods at this time of year will reveal all sorts of treasures. We're on the lookout for oak trees in particular because they will either give us acorns, and we are making acorn ink today, or if you're lucky, you might find some oak galls and we can have a go at that. And it's even better if you take along some willing helpers who do all the hard work and pick them up while you're doing the filming. Try and go on a dry day and find acorns that aren't too muddy. After a lovely morning foraging, I have got all sorts of goodies and I'm really excited to get going with acorn cup ink. So I went out to get acorns and acorn cups, but I managed to get some other things as well. These bizarre looking, oh gosh, growths are actually oak galls, and I found loads. I've not seen this sort before. What happens is a little wasp lays an egg on the oak tree, or in the acorn, and the oak tree protects itself by growing this gall around it. They are fantastic for making oak gall ink, which is one of the really old types of ink. Love those. Depending on what wasp it is, you either get these very nubbly ones. Closer to home, we get these, which I would call oak apples. When they're fresh, they really do look like apples, don't they? And then when they're dried, they look like this. And those are oak galls too. Anyway, that's something totally different because we're not doing oak galling today. We're going to do acorns. I've separated out the acorns from the cups, and this recipe just uses the cups. Most of these were dried and on the floor. I was going to show you that when they're very green, they come apart super easily, but they just fell apart anyway. So you need to separate the cups and the acorns. If I have time, and I'm not sure I'm going to have time, I would like to experiment with making acorn ink and acorn cup ink just to see what colour or whether it works. Logic would say that the browner they are, the better, rather than fresh and green like this. Totally incidentally, I found a black walnut tree as well. Now, I've already made walnut ink this year. There you go, just to prove I have. I made that with English walnuts because we've got a tree in the garden. But then I found this and I was like, what is it? And it is a black walnut. So you could make walnut ink. But when I picked those up, just because I happen to love fir cones. Right, let's keep those and we'll put the other goodies to the side. The first thing we have to do is crush the cups. Now, how many you need is a bit of those questions of how long is a piece of string? How much ink do you want to make? If you haven't got that many and you put too much water in, we can always evaporate it off and make it darker. So don't worry about quantities, just pick enough until you're fed up. You could use a pestle and mortar, but it needs to be one that isn't used for food. I use mine all the time. So my compromise is a tea towel. Put the oak cups in there. Far easier if they are dry. So if you've gone out on a wet day, dry them off first. And then this will be noisy. Whack them. And you need to crush them until they're a bit smaller than that, because the more you've crushed them, the more they will release the tannins. And it is a very good way of releasing some tension and energy, but do not bash your fingers. If your acorn cups are pretty grubby when you pick them, say they're muddy or it's, particularly wet, might be worth giving them a bit of a rinse before you use them, drying them and then crushing them, because otherwise all those impurities are going into your ink. You could always put these into a bag or an old pillowcase, something just to stop all these little bits of shell ricocheting all over the place. Once they are crushed to your satisfaction, or you are bored, whichever comes soonest, they will look something like this. We can now go and cook them. I've had some inspiration. Well, I hope it's inspiration. Rather than boiling it on the stove in an old pot, which of course you can do, I thought, why don't you use a slow cooker? Now, it should be one that you don't use for food, or you are going to wash it out incredibly carefully before you use it for food. This is one we were given and it's a bit little, so it may be perfect for small quantities of ink. And this acorn ink is all my crushed bits, does need to bubble away for a long time. I thought I could just put this on and let it bubble overnight actually. You put all your crushed bits in there, then we need to add water. Yum, yum, yum. Bring it to the boil and let it simmer away for as long as you've got patience for. I would certainly say 4 or 5 hours, because already you can see there's a little bit of colour coming out, but we want loads of that yummy tannin to come out of these shells so we can react it with the iron and get our ink. If you're doing on the stove top, I'd bring it to the boil it for an hour, maybe let it stop, let it seep a bit, bring it to the boil, repeat until you get the darkness you want. Keep an eye on it, top it up with boiling water if it evaporates off, but we need to pop that lid on and come back, well, probably tomorrow. This has been gently bubbling for about 12 hours. And I hope you can see how dark the liquid is. The slow cooker was so easy for this sort of long, gentle simmer that it needed. I've let it cool down and you can see what it looks like there. So yeah, slow cooker really worked. You can quite often get them on local free cycle or exchange websites. So maybe you can get hold of one of those if you're going to make a lot of ink. And what we need to do now is filter it. Usually I'd use a cheesecloth to filter. I thought I would try something different this time because we're not really going to have to squeeze it out. The bits are still hard. Say when you make walnut ink, you end up with a real mush and you've got to squeeze it hard. This is liquid and hard bits, so I think an ordinary filter will be fine. Got a sieve and I've got a couple of bits of kitchen towel. You could use a coffee filter, and this, I say, because the bits stay hard even after that super long cooking, it is so much easier to filter than something like walnut ink. I'll just let that drip and then we can go to the next stage. Do not worry if it's looking a bit pale at this point, because we can evaporate that liquor off and concentrate it. This is my filtered ink, so of course the moment of truth is to try it on paper. This is not finished, so do not panic if you look at this and think, oh, well, that looks wishy-washy and isn't going to do anything. There's another stage to go. But out of interest, let's look at the colour. And it is very pale. And I wouldn't be using that as ink. Nice colour though. What we need to do is add iron to it, because the iron will react with the tannins and darken it considerably. Now I have got iron sulphate, but the good news is there are alternatives. You could just crush up an iron tablet. You can even put rusty nails into a solution of vinegar and salt, and I think you call that a rust garden, and some of that liquid can be poured into this and it will do the same thing. Only trouble with a rust garden is it takes a few months to go. So I am going to add some of this. About I'm going to go for 2 spoonfuls to start with, because I've got quite a lot of the liquid. I'm going to give that a good stir and then let's look. I was expecting something a bit more dramatic than that. It has darkened it somewhat and slightly changed the colour. Let's just add another spoonful. But what will happen with time is that the iron will oxidise in the air and it will get darker and darker over, say, 24 hours. I just think there is too much water in this, and what I am going to do is decant some into a little pot, and I'm actually going to go and whack that in the microwave to boil away some of the water. It'll just be quicker. What I really should do is be patient, put that on the stove and evaporate the whole lot. So I've reduced that little pot down. Actually, I went a bit far, so it looks fairly thick now. Only took about 2 minutes in the microwave for that amount of time. Let's look. Oh yes, that is more like ink, isn't it? Let's see how it writes with my dip pen. So what am I going to say? Reduced. So it's a really black ink at this point. There's one further thing that I would like to do to improve the flow, and that is to add gum arabic. Now, this is a very old pot of gum arabic. Usually it's a clear gum. You can get it as crystals and just add it to water. You can get it as a fluid. Gum arabic is a binder and it will help with flow. So I'm going to treat myself to some new stuff, I reckon. I'm going to put in 3 drops. So it is the binder that they use to make watercolour. If you do not have gum arabic, or yours is in an even worse state than mine, you can use a few drops of honey. The only downside of that is, of course, this is very much a living ink, and any extra sweetness to it is likely to cause moulding issues in the long term. You won't see a dramatic difference, but a little gum arabic can help the flow and the binding. So I'm going to just put gum, oops, if I could spell gum, arabic. What I want to do is let these dry and see how they reactivate with water. While we're waiting for those to dry, why don't we just have a go at, oh, I don't know, drawing something. And of course, the thing we need to draw is an acorn, because it'd be rude not to. And the other thing that I suddenly thought might be quite interesting for you is this was the homemade walnut ink that I made. And I just show you what colour that was. And that's with no added iron. And then if I show you one with added iron, I've got all these little pots I've got going on. Must label them because I won't remember. So that's with added iron, that's walnut. This one is iron gall ink, which I made ages ago to the recipe that Jane Austen used to use, and she wrote all her novels like Pride and Prejudice with that ink. And funnily enough, this pen I bought in the gift shop at the Jane Austen Museum. Ideally, I should leave these for a day before we test their water resistance, but I haven't got time because I'm teaching tomorrow. So I've just got clean water on my brush, and actually that is hardly moving. That was the raw ink with nothing added. Again, the added iron, hardly moving. This surprises me because if you've seen my walnut ink video, it moved a lot. You could lift it. Can you see the difference there? So, well, there, I've learnt something today. Corner ink is water resistant. The problem actually with these inks and why the commercial inks have taken over is they attack the paper because they have acid, that tannic acid in it. It attacks the paper and can even eat holes in it over hundreds of years. I mean, really not an issue here. To say that the colour of the acorn ink is not my favourite. I really love the rich brown that you get with the walnut. But if you're struggling to find oak galls, and they can be tricky to find, or you haven't got a handy walnut tree in your garden, then acorn ink seems to be a really good bet. The final thing to say is this is a living ink. It has organic matter in, and with time, even if you've got it as a sealed bottle, you may notice mould. Do not panic. Mould is pretty inevitable, but can just be taken off and carry on using the ink. A few ways of reducing the mould. You could add vinegar. I don't particularly like to do that because the vinegar is acidic and will add to the acid of the ink, and I don't particularly like the smell while I'm drawing. You could add a little bit of rubbing alcohol, or indeed a little bit of cheap vodka as a preservative. What I like to do is simply to add some cloves. You might have some in the kitchen. They have some sort of antimicrobial properties, so they can just go in. Or you can use an essential oil, again, clove oil or wintergreen. A couple of drops can go into the ink.